All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in this week. This week I decided to do something a little different. We're going to do a solo podcast. I'm going to talk about questions and answers. Basically, I've got some questions here from the Patreon page, and I'll address some of the more broader questions that I get. I'm kind of going to freestyle this. I'm going to pull up those questions in a second. So, Robert asks, I once read a piece you wrote. I used to write, I still write for On the Water magazine, which is a magazine distributed from New Jersey through Massachusetts. And he, quote, how to effectively catch more fish and spend less time paddling while kayak fishing. And you wrote about it, never let your line scope out, drifting through bridge rips and the approach, safety advice, Hobies and rips. Can you please speak about these topics? This is a good one. And so a lot of times when you're fishing bridge rips, dock structure, rock piles, the most common way to fish these areas is by vertical jigging. Sure, you can catch fish that cruise mid-water column like bluefish and Spanish mackerel, but when it comes to me, when I think about fishing big structures, big piers, big bridges, most common technique employed is vertical jigging. And generally, a lot of these big structures might be channel related, might be loading docks, ports, etc. Generally, we're going to be talking about deep water, stuff 20 feet to 45 feet, 50 feet. That's really what I'm looking for. So one of the things that's, it's important to figure out how to time your tides for the most productive type of fishing. And especially with striper, flounder, trout, gray trout, or weak fish, redfish. I've fished a lot of different structures, lots of them. And if you had to tell me a universal tidal period to fish your structures, I would say there's probably about 4 hours that are really worth the time to fish. And those 4 hours are the end of the tidal period through slack and the start of the next tide. I'm not going to say a golden rule, it's end of incoming, start of outgoing, or it's bottom of outgoing, start of incoming. That'll change based on time of year, location, fisheries, etc., etc. But if I had to pick my starting point, that would be it, first of all. A lot of these big structures like bridges and rock piles have really strong current, which is not easy to handle in the kayak. But you can always fish a lot of these areas as the current slacks out, slack period, and then the change of the tide. This holds true for all the bridges that I used to fish up north. New Jersey bays, Delaware Bay, Chesapeake Bay, Bridge Tunnel, the big structures here in North Carolina. That seems to be a pretty standard rule that you can kind of get your time in during those periods. And I generally like to fish current for a lot of different fish under 1.5 knots. 1.5 knots is okay. That's kind of fast. But anything over 1.5 knots, it starts to get real tough. 2 knots, yeah, sure, you can fish it, but it's going to get tough a lot of the time. So I'd say my sweet spot for most species is going to be 0.5 knot to 1.5 knots. And that holds true for almost everything. And so we'll talk about, I remember this article talked a little bit about how to properly jig. So sometimes you'll see I did a redfish video the other day, I mentioned having 3 rods and reels ready to go. On that particular area, 3/4 ounce to 1.5 ounces covered all the weights I would need to jig properly. And one of the things that I wrote about was how you want to keep your line as vertical as possible and not have a scope. And what scope means is that your line will be scoping out, it'll get an angle in it. And that means you're no longer straight up and down with your kayak as you drift. And you should want to do this on a boat as well. And basically, a scope in the line basically is now dragging your bucktail diagonally. You're no longer, when you're jigging, working it properly because you're not getting the same rhythm that you're straight up and down, imparting the most amount of action on your jigging motion. And now your bucktail's scoped out. It's digging into sand. It's about 100 times more likely to snag up as soon as you start getting a diagonal presentation, because now it's drifting into a rock as opposed to bouncing on top of a rock or wood or something like that. So it's going to get its chance to get hung up. You're very likely to hang up. And the weight selection goes with the current. Right? Sometimes a lot of these areas, bridges, they'll have a lot of cross currents and swirly water and rips and stuff like that. And the tide will be pushing in a totally different manner 5 minutes apart. In 5 minutes, you'll be going from a 3/4 ounce to an ounce. Then you might go back to 3/4 of an ounce. Then you might need 1.5 ounces. Those tidal rips change pretty frequently based on what part of the bay might be pouring out or part of the ocean that's pouring in through the structure that you're fishing. A lot of times when you're exploring new areas to fish, it's always important to read the surface of the water too. You might see this big boil on the surface. I call it a boil. But actually what might be submerged there is an underwater rock pile and a huge depth change. So for example, you will visibly be able to see, let's say you're seeing an area of 35 feet of water and you see this big boil. And it'll shoot up to 25 feet of water on the top of that. And there's a push of water and current flowing over this boil. You can visibly see this on the surface. And when you have a fish finder, you can kind of lay out, okay, here's where the water's hitting. That's why the current's picking up so much. This is an area that will probably hold fish, especially if it's near a bridge or a select dock area. And your job is to fish it without having your line scoping out. I mean, you might not see in a lot of the videos, but that's exactly what I'm doing. I might be fishing a wreck or a shelf, something like that has a real distinct drop off, and I'm trying my absolute hardest to keep that line straight up and down. And majority of the fish want your presentation straight up and down. Stripers will stack up on sharp ledges, really sharp ledges, and you have to let line out as you go. So sometimes I used to start some drifts on some striper rips that would start in like 10 feet of water, and the current would push me right into 30 feet of water really quickly. And the kayak might be moving one direction. My line is kind of scoping a little bit. I have to use the foot pedals, play with the rudder, open the bail, let more line out, while still trying to jig it and keep contact in a steady motion as I slowly descend down this slope, and just following the bottom contour. These are what some of the situations that the pedal kayaks do, have an advantage, especially when you pair it up with a fish finder, and you can really follow your jigs down these slopes. And the same thing holds true for redfish too. I noticed that redfish kind of like to set up in similar areas that stripers did, even though they might not be as keen on hitting on aggressive presentations. So that basically covers that, I'd say. All right, next. That was 10 minutes. I hope that was a good response. Michael asks, I would like to hear you talk about your game plan and how you come up with one. I always try a very distinct plan. Sometimes I feel like fishermen think they can just go out there and figure it out, and then they catch nothing. I can usually scrounge up a decent day by having a plan and a backup plan, and more often than not, the decent plan will turn into decent surprises. Should be an interesting topic. Yeah, definitely, man. So I always, the night before, I usually start, formulating where am I going to go, and I always wake up in the morning and check the wind again. A lot of the times when I take the kayak into the ocean, first thing I do is think about, okay, what happens if the surf is too big, or the wind is too strong, etc., or this, the thunderstorms are going to start hitting around 8 a.m., etc. So first thing is for my ocean days, I always say, okay, if I can't get into the ocean, where am I going to go in the bay? It holds true here in the Carolinas and back up north, right? That always holds true. I usually have a plan when I'm heading out. The ocean fishing, there's usually two things that are going to happen probably. Either I'm looking for migrating fish on the beach. That could be redfish or stripers. Hopefully soon king max. Or I'm going out to jig structures, reefs, or rock piles, right? And those are the plans. That whole reef structure fishing, sure, I can catch every species you can name, but that's the plan. I'm going to fish these structures. And those structures I'm probably either going to fish by jigging them, bait fishing them, or trolling over them, right? There's specific structures I'm going to hit. And then, I just don't hit areas based on, just going out there to go out there. That's for sure. I really try to figure out what I think I can bump into. So, like, for example, the structures here, I'm pretty much confident that I should be finding the three species, here in the Carolinas in the summer that after a year I've seen. It seems like my summer rec fish are barracuda, sheep's head, and flounder, right? And up north, and absolutely, there's plenty of surprises I can catch out there jigging. I could catch amberjack for sure, maybe redfish, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of every area I have an idea what I should be catching. And of course, yes, you can get the surprises all the time. It helps to have a distinct plan. It seems like you can be overwhelmed by the amount of fish. At the same time, it's good to have a primary target or a primary idea of what to do. I agree with you on this a lot. Certain areas I know are going to hold redfish and probably flounder, and then everything else might come along. And certain times of the year, absolutely, there's like a single game in town. That was very true for up north. It was striper and bluefish. April was striper and bluefish. There was nothing else I can target in the ocean. That made it a lot easier as opposed to around here. Around here, there's just a lot more fish, and it is overwhelming, man. And I have fallen into that trap of not sticking with one particular, fish to target and ran around and targeted too many things. So, yeah. All right. And Michael says, secondly, I would like to hear a little bit on how you scout new grounds, what you look for, or how you decide on which lure to use. I bought and you mailed me ISV swim shads and jig heads, and I've yet to catch anything on them, mainly looking for stripers, but I don't necessarily decide to put them on the line, because I've caught more with pencils and SP minnows. When do you decide to switch it up with lures, presentations, or colors? Something along these lines will be interesting. All right, so if you haven't noticed, I fish with like 4 different things almost all the time. I'm fishing with soft plastics, right? My own. In general, I sometimes put on hoagies or something like that. But in general, I'm fishing with my own soft plastics. I'm fishing with tubes. I'm fishing with bucktails and Berkeley Gulp. Or I'm fishing with bait. I really don't think you see me fishing with too many other things besides those, at least in saltwater. Why do I always go to soft plastics for my stripers when I'm looking to throw with artificials? It's because I can fish them anywhere in the water column, and a lot of my striper fishing happens at bays and in the ocean, and those fish can be kind of anywhere in the water column from like 20 feet, up to the surface. And I generally throw them, I don't know, it's like I find them to catch fish. I never had much luck with topwater sizable stripers, and I know it happens, but that to me is mostly a boulder game. I usually throw those swim shads at stripers. For years I used to troll plugs over them, and then soft plastics became the name of my game. For years, soft plastics are the most confident thing I can throw. I mean, a lot of the times when you're sitting in that kayak and you see stripers 15 feet down over 20 feet of water, sure, I could troll deep diving plugs over their heads, but in terms of a lure I can throw and retrieve, soft plastics absolutely can be worked in a couple of different ways and stay in their zone. I can throw an 1.5-ounce jig head. I can, snap jig it along the bottom, and I can also do an aggressive retrieve through their zone. And, that's been the ticket for me for years, that same type of cadence. Absolutely. If you ask me what if I wasn't throwing my own soft plastics at stripers a lot of the times, I would be throwing exactly what you see John Skinner throwing, and that is a bucktail and a pork rind. That can be fished all over the water column, and when do you decide to switch up lure colors? All right, lures and colors. So size of the lures, usually my striper stuff will be from 5.5 inches to 9 inches. If I'm confident there's some very large striped bass around, I will throw 9-inch swim shads with like 2-ounce hoagie jig heads. 9 inches, I'm not afraid to throw 9-inch baits at stripers, not at all. I find early in the season, when stripers just show up in the winter, after the winter, I find like the smaller baits sometimes get better reactions out of them. And it depends. Sometimes I'm not overwhelmed by small fish. When I find small fish, sub 25-inch fish to be really overwhelming, I'll go to bigger presentations for sure. The color depends to me on water clarity. If the water's clean, I like natural colors. If the water's dirty, I like silly colors like chartreuse and white. In general, if you had to ask me what the best color was, I'd always say white. White works well in dirty water, and it still works pretty well in clean water. Sometimes I find darker colors, like naturally looking ones, to work better on stripers in clean water, like that grayish black color I have. I call it the ghost mullet. That to me is probably the best color in a naturally clean water. Absolutely, what the stripers are feeding on makes a big difference. The smaller baits like peanut bunker, sometimes, but guys always say match the hatch, match the hatch, match the hatch. Sometimes a larger bait. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times that fish were feeding on peanut bunker or small menhaden, and I just said, screw it, screw these little fish, and I bumped it up to the 9-inch bait, and still was pulling out big fish. To me, the paddle tail lure is probably the most popular lure used by boat anglers now. Typically it's called a mojo. What all that is an oversized paddle tail. Topwater stuff can be really. I've had a lot of luck when I started fishing on topwater, especially in the back marshes and stuff. When you don't have enough water to really work your soft plastics as effectively. But over the years, I've gravitated away from plugs and topwater to straight soft plastics. Now, there's certain areas where working soft plastics is very hard, and to me, that is like the boulders of Long Island Sound, where you might have a rock that comes up out of nowhere and is 2 feet it shoots you into 2 feet of water, and then that boulder has a cliff on it and shoots you back into 20, and then you have another rock that comes up into 5, and you have these big valleys and depressions in a lot of the Long Island Sound boulder fields. You start throwing, any plug that dives, you're going to get hung up. A shad with a jig head is because you have all these bouncy little contours. And in those environments, I mean, to me, the most useful lure that I can tie on is the tubing worm, which only goes down about 2 and 3 feet, but those stripers like to hide on certain parts of those boulders set up on the rips, usually higher up in the water column. And to me, the tube always gets the better reaction out of the striper than the pencil popper did. A lot of times I would troll through large areas of boulders to get those fish, but if I worked the pencil poppers, sure, occasionally it'd work out, but the tube really, I mean, the history of the tube and worm comes out of the Chesapeake Bay as a for a commercial fishing tool. So yeah, that whole tube thing is my shallow water presentation in boulder fields for sure. And I've caught fish 40-pounders on those tubes, man. A lot of big fish I've taken on striper tubes. As silly of a presentation as it is, and as silly as a concept as it is. And the other thing is, a lot of the soft plastic stuff I work in the videos a lot. My striper fishing usually happens 10 to 25 feet of water, where a plug that dives down 5 feet is not effective. It's really not. Same thing with a pencil popper. It's not going to be effective in those environments where those stripers hug the bottom. They're kind of like mud stripers, just laying around. So the most effective way to cover across their faces is sometimes with just 1.5 ounce or 2 ounce jig head and working those paddle tails through, man. All right, let's see. All right, so Tucker says, I'd love for you to get a surf or pier fishing expert on a podcast. That's a good idea. I don't have a kayak or boats, so I'm relegated to the beaches. I would love to get some tips on that style of fishing. Specifically, I'd like to know how you target specific fish. I'm in NC2, North Carolina, and usually just throw out shrimp on a 2-hook bottom rig. Sit and wait. I'm willing to try new things. I just don't know what to do. Shrimp on the rig seems to pretty much catch anything, but I'm not catching a lot of anything. Okay, a couple things. I'm not much of a surf guy, but I have a couple ideas. First of all, from the surf scene, your two probably most consistent things to catch around here in terms of off the bottom are redfish, black, and flounder and black drum. So 3 things, right? If you're having a problem with shrimp, when I came down, I played with shrimp for a little bit. My problem was pinfish were destroying the shrimp. If you're fishing, off piers and the beaches, absolutely spend the time to get the good baits. And the good baits are the mullet, the crabs, the mud crabs, sand fleas, even fiddlers. But I would say sand fleas and mud crabs and mullet are probably your best baits to fish from shore over here. That's my opinion of it. I know shrimp does catch a lot of stuff too, but shrimp also catches a lot of like the pinfish, small croaker, etc., etc. I don't know much about surf fishing around here, and we just had some pretty good bait all of early October and late September, mullet and menhaden, and we were chunking them on simple fish finder rigs. I'm just fishing a 9-foot pole, and we had pretty good luck with the reds. Doing that, and part of that was a weather pattern that I was kind of confident in, which was post northeast winds and heavy northeast winds rather, and a full moon. So I was looking for redfish. In terms of flounder fishing from shore, I recommend checking out a lot of John Skinner's stuff. Even though he's up north, the same techniques will work here. Absolutely, those flounder are the same as the southern flounder. So you can catch fish from shore doing that too. But if you're not confident in the shrimp, man, I would go with try to work the better baits too. Absolutely, you'll have opportunities to catch Spanish mackerel and bluefish. If you ask me from shore what I'm looking for, a lot of that's visual. You can see them busting or working bait, or the time of year that they're absolutely running through the area. I know that the bigger bluefish tend to run in April and May. Spanish mackerel, you throw on small tins and presentations like that and working them fast. I'll see who I can get on here for that too in the future. All right, next. Loving the podcast, man. I listen to a variety of different podcasts, mainly hockey and other hobbies, but I have yet to find a good podcast that isn't cringy as fuck or primarily about freshwater. Yeah, there is a lot of freshwater podcasts. I commute from the Shark River Inlet area to Philadelphia several times a week, so podcasts are a huge part of those drives. That's what I do usually. If I'm driving 4 hours, I'll listen to something. It's super nice to talk about specific fisheries, tactics, cooking, cleaning methods. First few episodes. All right, and that was just a thank you. Hopefully you can keep up the good work. Okay, let me see. I got a couple other typical question and answer things. So people always ask me about the kayak I'm in, why I've stuck with this Hobie Outback for as long as I have. If you ask me, I think one of my favorite fishing kayaks is probably that Hobie Outback, and I'd say the Hobie Revolution. The Pro Angler is a nice boat, but to me it's too heavy. It's hard to lift. I don't like it in the surf zone. I'm not an expert surf launching guy. I mean, guys love to. You go on Stripers Online, you can hear these guys masturbate to each other about surf launchings and landing all day. I go when the weather's good. I can safely get out there and hopefully safely get back. That's my goal. I don't really care about surfing through that zone. I care about catching fish. Really, that's like what gets me going. The kayak's a tool to get me out there. And I feel like the Pro Angler, it's really hard to get back to that surf zone on the way in. It's even hard to get out there. And the weight of the boat coming back in is kind of dangerous. I mean, I've had my Outback land on me, and it hurt. Don't get me wrong, I was bruised up, but I was able to get home back in the car. That's part of a problem you have to deal with when you're surf launching and landing. Coming back to that surf zone is how heavy is your boat going to be when it lands on you. So that to me is one of the reasons I go with Outback over Pro Angler. My opinion on the pedal drive system, I want the lightest boat, man. A lot of these guys like these PDLs, Natives, etc., all these prop drive systems. To me, they're too heavy to take through the surf zone. That's my opinion of that. The Hobie Revolution, I like it. The thing I don't like about it is, dude, I'm lazy, man. I like to be comfortable when I'm fishing, sprawl out a little bit. I'm not the smallest guy. Maybe if I was 160 and like 5'6", 5'8", I think I'd be a little more comfortable in that Revo. I use it when I'm just single task operation. Like, okay, I'm going out there just to catch striper, or I'm just going out there just to catch false albacore. A lot of the times I like to do this multi-species stuff, target a bunch of different things when I'm out there. That means I got to carry a decent amount of stuff with me. Cooler bag, and here in North Carolina, I need a cooler bag, I need my milk crate, I need this. There's so many possibilities what I end up bumping into. But you'll start seeing me on that Hobie Revolution pretty soon when the false albacore fishing gets into full swing. My opinion, still, Hobie does have the best pedal drive system. But there are times like, a lot of the Virginia kayak anglers are really good paddle kayak fishermen. The best on the coast, in my opinion, is those Virginia guys. In terms of who fishes out of a paddle kayak, I haven't seen anywhere on the coast the numbers, the refinement, the tactics as those paddle guys, man. Those paddle guys are the real deal. They're very good paddle kayak fishermen, and they're diverse in their skill set. They're good bottom fishermen, they're good live bait fishermen, and they're good at jigging. And they're good at covering distance, man, for paddle kayaks. If you ask me the pedal kayak, if I had to settle on one kayak till the end of time, it'd probably be the Hobie Outback. It's probably where I'd be at. All right, next, let's see what we got. What do you think of the striper fishery? Do you agree with the sentiment that the striper fishery is declining? This is a hot topic. I think the striper fishery is in trouble. But it's still at a point where the majority of the money-making sector is okay with it. How is that as an answer? It's a little bit of a convoluted one. Basically, that as long as the charter boats can still, catch lots of fish, customers can still go home happy. The tackle shops are still getting enough business from it. A guy like me could still put out enough videos from it. I think everyone's kind of okay with that. I understand the average surf angler. I mean, fishing has gotten a lot more angry. How can I say it? It's a very angry place, the striper community. I don't like striped bass fishing because there's so much anger that I don't see when I do something like weakfish or redfish or anything else. The other fisheries are so mellow. but there is no drama like striper drama. That's where you see grown men break down and become very hostile towards each other on social media, forums, you name it. And that's where the majority of the interest in the angling community north of Virginia is. It's that stupid striped bass. And all that drama has kind of turned me away from that fishery and my enjoyment for it. I don't even enjoy targeting them like I used to. There used to be a lot more fish to target. So here's how it used to go down. And, somebody who's been at this game longer than I have can comment even more. So let's say 2012, pre-Sandy, right? People say there's a lot more people fishing on the water. I don't think so. I think that there was a lot more fish to go around because the common tactic was, fuck, the fleet is here where I like to fish. But that's no big deal. I can go 1 mile down, fish this rip, and catch lots of fish on my own without all these jerk-offs. And that slowly has changed, that the fish aren't in the places they always were, in the numbers that they used to be. I mean, the marshes used to be great striper grounds for fish to 40 inches. Man, I haven't caught a 40-inch fish in the marsh at least 5-6 years. I almost gave up on the marsh. The rips would always have fish. The structures would always have fish. And you could always get away from the madness, the fleet. And then, in the last couple of years, the fish have gotten into more tighter areas, and the runs have gotten a lot shorter. I mean, the spring run used to last. And it wouldn't be so up and down that there'd be these big lulls and fish disappearing. I mean, I used to catch, man, if you look at my logbook, guys, late August in Jamaica Bay, I'd be catching 30-pound fish. In late August, for years, that fishery's done. That summer fishery in the Back Bay, it's done. It's been done. So, yeah, man. And I would catch, I remember early September one morning, I had like a 35-pounder on live spot. This was like 2011 or 2012. I had like a 35-pounder on live spot and like a 25-pounder. And then I jigged like 5 other illegal fish. Man, we used to catch fish in that New York City region all September, all August, and not small fish. We'd catch 30 to 44-inch fish. Man, and then, it started, becoming a couple of fish in the summer to just short, sublegal fish in the summer. So the summer fishery definitely changed more than anything. The migrations were always hot and heavy in the spring and the fall, but we definitely lost our summer fishery. So that was a big bummer. And, the social media tantrums, the surf casting, it just caused me to lose interest in it too, on top of that. I used to do what I do and not really care. Now there's too many eyes on me and what I'm doing striper-wise and all the crybabies, etc. Oh, I spot burn striper. I only get spot burn cries for striper. That's it. Nobody busts my balls about anything else. Striper, 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 striper. So, and it's all the internet tough guys that are striper, striper, striper. They wouldn't know how to catch a weak fish if their life depended on it. Anyway, next. I had a question also. What do you think about the decline of bluefish in Long Island Sound? We have not seen any bluefish this year at all. My friend, the writing has been on the wall with the bluefish for a little bit too, despite a couple of strong runs. Same thing as a kid, 18 years old. Bluefish was what I caught all summer, not little guys. We used to go down in the marshes at Jamaica Bay every morning in July and August from the sand, from the salty, sulfury pit of the creeks. You can throw your poppers and connect with 8 to 12 pound bluefish every morning before the sun got high. 8 a.m. would be kind of like the game over. And then, less and less every year. And then no years. Then none. And remember the last 2 years, the Back Bay run of bluefish would be done. I mean, over. It would be a 2 week run in the fall. 2 weeks in September. When it used to be big blues all August, all September, all October. The spring run. The spring run was good. The spring run, we did have a good year or two, and then it slowed down. Is it cyclical? That's that's the usual theory. Weak fish are cyclical, bluefish are cyclical. Does it have to do with the Menhaden fleets? I don't know, but blue fishing absolutely this year more than ever. Bluefish now has become a spring run fish with some fall run and intermittent fishing. While bluefish used to be a summer fishery too, man, which is the one that's kind of sad. It seems like, that New York area lost its summer fishery for both striper and bluefish, which is a bummer. And now the new summer fishery is porgy, whether you like it or not. That is your new summer fishery. Fluke fishing's still pretty good if you ask me. Weak fishing, it's been good for at least 4 or 5 years now. I'd say weak fish have made a great comeback, even though interest is very low on them, as you can only keep one. I never viewed weak fish as an eating fish. Gray trout to me is not a great fish to eat. I'd say it's just slightly better than bluefish. But I find them beautiful, and that was one of the first big fish I ever caught. So they have a special place in my heart. In 2007, I landed like a 14-pounder on a live Menhaden. But no, that's another problem is the bluefish fishery. Let's see what other questions I've got here. I'm always curious how you got to where you're at. Your inspiration to some of the younger anglers, and yourself and other YouTubers. What's the best advice you have for me to eventually earn a living while fishing? That was a gradual, road I've walked on. First thing you have to get in your head is you'll never get rich doing this, right? There's very few charter captains that are making ridiculous amounts of money. There's very few tackle shop owners that are making ridiculous amounts of money. And there's very few media outlets that are making ridiculous amounts of money. You do your fishing, and the same thing, commercial fishermen. You do your fishing for the love of it, right? And platforms will change, opportunities will change. For me, it was a slow development. I left my corporate gig. I started guiding. I was guiding full time. I didn't have any issues, picking up customers. I was fishing hard for 5 to 8 years and developed a reputation of being a good kayak angler. During that time, I set up, social media platforms, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, which I don't recommend Facebook anymore. Facebook is out with the old already. I think Facebook will no longer be relevant to people under 40 years old soon enough. That was part of it. I developed my own line of soft baits, and I recommend anyone who's really good at a specific type of fishing that is going down that path. Never a bad idea to take something and try to modify it to some way, whether it be jig heads, custom plugs, custom kayak equipment, custom apparel. I mean, there's a lot of things that, you might think that is better. Right now, there's a certain type of jig head that I want so bad. And I'm asking everybody, can you make this? Can I help you? Can we push this out? And I'm still haven't found somebody who says, Elias, I like this idea. We can do this. Here's how we're going to do it. No, I already have this image of my head of what I think is the perfect saltwater heavy jig head. And it has a certain type of bait keeper that I want. but it's mostly in the front. All right, let's not get too many details. But it's like the idea here is, remain innovative. Um, Perhaps your path is to become a charter captain. Perhaps your path is to own a tackle shop. Or perhaps your path is to be involved in media. And I use media as a kind of a loose term. It could be digital online media like On the Water Magazine, Carolina Sportsman, YouTube, whatever might precede YouTube. It's tough to say what this platform will do. I honestly think this was a platform of being there early was a big plus. I mean, look at the really big YouTubers, Blacktip, Guggen Squad, all these guys. They've been making videos for 6 years, and the bulk of their heavy views came in 2015, 16, and some of 2017. I was a little late on this train. 2016, 17, I didn't have the personality to really, draw in that kind of attention either. And I didn't clickbait properly either until, last year or so. There's a lot of opportunities. Take it incrementally. Don't say I'm going to start fishing in this platform. Try to work in the industry. I mean, some of the best experience right now you can get is working for one of the big tackle shops. Tackle Warehouse, Tackle Direct, Fish USA, J&H Tackle. All these guys, for example, depending where you are in the region of the country, big tackle shop is a good gateway to meet a lot of industry people. I never had that opportunity, but if I was 18 years old now or 20 years old, that would be where I would go. Try to get a job at one of those places. YouTube absolutely can still be there. You can kind of hybridize it with a charter business, like how I started off YouTubing. So there's a lot of different opportunities there. So that kind of concludes this one. Hopefully you enjoyed. That was 45 minutes of me rambling, talking about fishing techniques, all that different stuff. So that's what I got for you this week. I will catch up very soon. Thanks, guys.